Zombies may lack the deep individuality of vampires or werewolves, but they make up for it with a kind of collective charisma, enough to earn them a solid place in horror cinema. In this video, we'll take a look at 10 movies that define the zombie genre. The first film to ever use the word zombie in its title, and the first to establish a visual and thematic template that would influence zombie portrayals for decades. Released shortly after the smash success of Dracula, this Hollywood production follows a sorcerer living in the Caribbean, played by Bela Lugosi, who uses dark magic to turn living people into zombies, mindless servants of his evil will. This version of the zombie is very different from what we're used to today, but it's actually much closer to the historical roots of the concept. Thanks to the film's popularity, zombies were understood for many years, up until the 1960s, as living people under the control of some malevolent force, with the zombie figure tied to a specific cultural and geographic context. Until the late 1960s, zombie films were relatively rare, largely due to how niche and culturally specific the image of the zombie still was. But that changed forever with the release of George Romero's low-budget debut. The production was so tight they couldn't even afford color film, yet it completely transformed the genre. Romero was the first to introduce the modern concept of the zombie, a reanimated corpse that feeds on human flesh and can only be stopped by destroying the brain. But the film's impact didn't stop there. At least two more key innovations came from Romero. First, he introduced the now classic setup of a small group of survivors barricaded in a building, trying to fend off hordes of the undead. And second, he brought social commentary into zombie horror, using the undead invasion as a backdrop for deeper human conflict. Both of these ideas became cornerstones of the genre, and they still are today. Another film by George Romero, and one that absolutely deserves mention, as it once again set the standard for zombie cinema for years to come. Unlike Night of the Living Dead, this time Romero delivers a wide, sweeping view of the zombie apocalypse, skillfully blending action, consumerism critique, a touch of romance, and of course, plenty of zombies. Despite all its layers, the film doesn't feel heavy-handed. You can just as easily enjoy it as an epic ride filled with shootouts, chases, suspense, and importantly, a moody, atmospheric soundtrack.
You know, when we get back to New York...
You don't have to say anything now.
By the late 1970s, zombie horror was quickly gaining mainstream popularity, and this Italian film played a major role in that rise. Directed by Lucio Fulci, a recognized master of Italian horror, it's worth watching for that reason alone if you're a fan of the genre. Historically, though, the film stands out as a prime example of zombie horror made purely for entertainment. There are no deeper themes, no layered meanings, just a tropical island, a random group of people, and a whole lot of zombies. Enjoy! Fulci leaned heavily into spectacle and practical effects, so there's plenty to see on screen. This low-budget New Zealand film may not have spawned a string of sequels or shattered box office records, but it still holds a solid place in the history of zombie horror. The reason? The wild, in the best way, chaotic energy of director Peter Jackson, who managed to pack the film not just with hordes of zombies, but also an absurd amount of blood, some martial arts, a love story, and one rat monkey. The film earned its cult status for good reason and remains one of the finest examples of how to do zombie horror comedy right. It's also rumored to be the goriest movie ever made, if you go by the amount of fake blood used on set.
Stop killing the dead. They're mine. If you don't want the dead coming back to life, why don't you just kill the living?
Another Italian entry on the list, though this one is worlds away from your typical zombie apocalypse story. A surreal tale about a cemetery caretaker who spends his nights shooting the undead as they crawl out of their graves, only to unexpectedly find love in the very same graveyard. Unlike most zombie horror films, this one stands completely on its own. It masterfully blends horror, drama, and even comedy, all wrapped in a striking and cohesive visual style. This film stands out for being the first to explore the transformation into a zombie as a deeply personal journey. Shot on a shoestring budget with basic effects and an unknown cast, it still carved out a place in zombie cinema history. Its significance lies not only in the unique perspective it offered at the time, but also in the way director Andrew Parkinson approached it technically. The entire film is shot in a style we'd now call mockumentary, a choice that was ahead of its time, considering the Blair Witch Project wouldn't come out until the following year. Strictly speaking, Danny Boyle's film doesn't quite fit the traditional zombie mold. Its monsters aren't reanimated corpses, but living people infected with a rage-inducing virus. Still, in terms of tone and theme, it fits squarely within the genre and even redefines it in some key ways. Boyle revisits familiar questions of human conflict and aggression in the face of catastrophe, but builds a different kind of narrative. Instead of barricading themselves and holding the line, his characters are constantly on the move, giving the story a new, urgent momentum. And one more thing, this film introduced the idea of fast-moving zombies, a concept that quickly took over the genre and pushed the slow, shambling dead into the background for years to come. Another zombie horror comedy, but one with major significance for the genre. Edgar Wright's film isn't just a clever mix of laughs and scares, and it's far more than a parody built on recycled tropes. It's a genuine zombie horror movie, seamlessly blended with the structure and charm of a romantic comedy. Packed with nods to classic zombie films, Shaun of the Dead is both a love letter to the genre and one of the best horror comedies ever made, crafted by fans for fans. George Romero's biggest zombie project to date, Land of the Dead once again set the tone for where the genre would go next. First, it greatly expanded the scale. This was arguably the first zombie horror film to focus not on a single house or town, but on an entire community of survivors. Second, Romero pushed further an idea he had hinted at before, the self-organization of zombies. No longer just a mindless horde, the undead here begin to show signs of learning and adaptation. For the first time, this concept took center stage in the plot, and others quickly ran with it. From Fido to Warm Bodies, many later films explored the idea of zombies becoming more human.